So I've been thinking a lot recently about what really makes me happy, what drives me, what, makes me get up in the morning, what makes me say when I go to bed at night, that was a good day. I've realised that it's a fairly simple mix for me and probably nothing new. For me, happiness and fulfilment comes from creativity and nature and movement and time with the people I love. I'm definitely an introvert, and I found more and more recently that my social battery is pretty finite, especially when that interaction is a digital rather than a physical one. I spend pretty much all day on a computer, mostly in meetings and online calls, and I really struggle to connect with my friends and family in that way too. I guess I crave something physical and authentic. Lately, something creative I've been experimenting with is sourdough. I started trying to make sourdough in lockdown, which never went very well, but lately it's something I've been really wanting to revisit and learn more about. A couple of years ago, I listened to a podcast that I still think about now, and one of the guests talked about the importance of humans using their hands to create things. I do still think about that consciously and subconsciously, especially when I realise that something is missing in my own life. When I feel at my worst, it's usually when I'm not meeting that need. It's silly. I often don't realise how important it is for me until I'm no longer using it. It's almost like when you realise you need to drink water by the time you're already dehydrated. Well, anyway, back to the sourdough. It's kind of, well, it hasn't gone well. I made my first loaves on the weekend and they just weren't right. My sourdough starter has been so active lately, which, by the way, thank you so much to everyone who helped me diagnose my starter problems. But I guess it just wasn't active enough, or maybe the dough was too wet. I'm not really sure, but I'll keep trying. Also, for the past couple of weeks, most of my evenings have been spent working on field notes, the second volume which will be coming out in winter. It's amazing how long the process takes to put these books together. I'll get to the end of an evening and in 2 or 3 hours realise I've only made maybe 1 or 2 pages. We did things a bit differently this time, so Emily and I wrote down all the components we wanted to include, we identified some common themes, and then we made a pretty clear-cut structure. I still need to take so many photos, which, to be honest, is making me a bit nervous. One of the biggest things I've learnt from writing a book is that I find if I really want to do something, then I can. The only limitations are really the ones I set myself. I mean, sure, there are the practical things, time, money, that kind of thing, but that's also just about setting realistic expectations. I'm talking more about the big things, the personal boundaries we set ourselves and the limitations we set on what we are really capable of. We have 2 small local shops selling copies of our first volume, and I feel like the second volume is a bit more mature, more structural, a bit more aesthetically cohesive. I'm trying to feel a bit more confident in approaching some other small businesses for this next edition. Although I love that friends and family are eager to own copies of their own, there's something really special and validating, I guess, to have those books in the hands of strangers.
I just feel this one is so much more creative.
Do you?
Yeah,
okay.
And very wintry, and it all flows. I think everything's really linked.
We kind of know what
really
we're doing.
excited
Well.
by it. Yeah.
Good.
Do you...
So we're on our way to the plot to finally put down some cardboard that Chris's dad had kindly been collecting for us. It's filled the entire back of the car, so it should probably cover 1 bed, knowing how much you need of everything just to cover space at the plot. Every time I've ordered compost or wood chip, it really doesn't cover what you think it will, but it's a good start, and it's good that it's raining today because that will help to wet it and hold it down. It's about 7 degrees, it's very, very cold, very dark out. I was going to go for a run today. After that, I'm going to make an apple crumble with some Bramley apples that my granddad gave to me. And then we're going to take that to my mum's for a Sunday roast this afternoon, which I'm really looking forward to because I feel like I haven't really spent much time with my mum lately, so yeah, that would be really nice. But first things first is to go out and stand in the cold for a little bit. I'd also like to get some photos from the allotment of people's winter veg, if they've grown any, so that I can put some kind of winter themed gardening photos into field notes in addition to my own things. So in the past couple of weeks, I've started going running again. I've been running on and off since I was about 18, and I took it more seriously during the pandemic when I was running a half marathon every month for about a year. It has been incredible for myself just to get back outside and run through the dark. I came across a video of myself recently from back during the pandemic, and I feel like I'm almost unrecognisable. It's funny how unaware of my body I was, and yet how I was the most content I've ever been. I've struggled with my body image for quite a long time, but I found it kind of funny that the version of myself that I think is the most beautiful is the one I was least physically conscious of. I don't know. I guess I'm just trying to get back to that version of myself, but at the same time, I think I also need to let go of that version of myself that existed then, because she doesn't exist now, and that time doesn't exist either. Maybe I need to take the elements of what I loved about that person, that feeling I had, and create something more, or something that exists now. I was so unaware of my body back then, except in the way it could move, how I needed to nourish it, the miles it was taking me every day, 13, 14 miles a day. I felt so free and really intentional. I've been thinking about how fast this year has gone. I've started a new job, put my home up for sale. My partner has left an 8-year career in the army and moved in with me. So much has been happening, and I feel like I'm thinking so much about what's next, what's going to come next, without really sitting down and being serious with myself about what's making me happy, long-term, deeply happy, deeply content. Not just within the next 5 minutes or through something material, although that's got a place too. But to become the kind of person I could look back on in a video and think, yeah, she's so happy and vibrant and she's doing what really nourishes her. I guess I'm also really conscious that life is going by so quickly these days, and I'll be 30 in 2 years, and I'm actually quite scared that I'm not going to be living my life in a way that's most meaningful and valuable to me. Maybe what I should be more afraid of is never knowing if I've reached that point, that zenith, because that implies that life is about the peak, and I don't think that's true. I kind of think life is probably a big collection of memories and experiences, some good, some bad, and I want, maybe not unreasonably, to have most of my memories to be filled with comfortable fulfillment and contentment in the grand scheme of things. I'm learning that when I feel stuck or discontent, I really need to push through that discomfort and do the things that make me feel good, do the things that scare me. I think maybe as a society, we are becoming more and more afraid of that state of discomfort and, honestly, of putting in the work to get to where we want to go. I know that because I've been there. But the world is not going to get me to where I'm going, where I want to be, unless I move my feet. I'm finally working on my coffee dyed tote bag. The design I'm doing is like a pine tree stem. Is that the branch? I'm not sure what the right term for it is. I've used a stem stitch for the central part, and I'm not sure what the stitch I've used for the needles, but then for the pine cones themselves I'm using a bullion stitch, which is I hate it. It's so difficult. I tried to do a bullion stitch on another tote bag when I first started embroidering, which was only, I think was it earlier this year? Earlier this year, which seems so strange to me. It feels like I've been doing it for a long time, but I'm still such a newbie on all of this. I'm trying to just get the... Right, that's through. I'm doing a bullion stitch now for 2 pine cones, and then I'm leaving it at that. I've tried to do quite simple patterns for the Etsy bags that Emily and I have been designing over the last couple of months. I had thought that I would get through them really quickly, but I've just been busy with other things, and filming has taken up a lot of time as well, which I've really enjoyed. So I'm still learning and still enjoying myself. So yesterday it was such a dark and moody day. It felt like it was dark by about 3 o'clock. We had massive hailstorms and it just rained all day, and outside the ground is completely sodden now. So now the sun is shining and it's a blue sky, so I really just wanted to make a smoothie. So I've got frozen banana, spinach, frozen berries, some oats, water and some vegan protein powder as well. I've always thought when I've got my garden, or sometime in the future, if there's anything I am self-sufficient in, I'd want it to be in berries and spinach, because I have that every day nearly, and I always have berries on my oats or in a smoothie. And it made me think a bit as well about, the concept of self-sustainability and self-sufficiency, and how inachievable that is for people nowadays, because we live in such brutally independent ways. We are not living in communities where we all kind of, share our wealth. But it also made me think about the idea of self-sufficiency not being about making or growing everything that you could ever want, but about exactly what you need, exactly enough to be sufficient in something, not having necessarily an excess or having things that you might want that really aren't available to you for whatever reason, which I think can, take the pressure off people. It's what is self-sufficiency to you, what is enough for you, rather than having to, make and grow everything yourself and reaching for that goal that just doesn't exist because we don't live in those kinds of communities anymore. So kind of alleviated a bit of strange pressure on me that, I felt like, this is never going to happen. I'm never going to have this lifestyle, but that doesn't matter, because it's about what is enough for me. For someone that might be growing a pot of basil on their windowsill, and that's enough for them, and that's okay. For someone else, it might be, rearing all their own livestock and having all of their own eggs and their own meat, if that's what they consume, and that being enough for them rather than buying it elsewhere and not necessarily knowing where that comes from. So yeah, I think it's a really worthwhile kind of exercise to think, you know, what's enough for you and what's realistic for you, what can you achieve and what's going to make you happy, and finding those small, you know, senses of accomplishment in a way that is satisfying and non-pressuring. So I think it's finished. This is the final piece. I just need to use a wet cloth and take off the wipeable marker that I used to draw the design. Oh, and I've got quite a few threads still that I need to tie off. The back looks like this, which I'm not too bothered about. And then I'm going to iron this as well, and the other two that I've made, so that they look a bit neater for photos, and also to take away the shape of the ring. I'm really pleased with this. I wanted to do something that was quite simple. In previous pieces that I've done, they have taken me hours. I did one that was like a brassica bag, and it must have taken me, I think, 12 or 13 hours cumulatively, because I did hundreds of French knots to make like broccoli and cauliflower florets. Oh, it just took me forever. So since then I've learned my lesson a bit, and I'm trying to simplify the designs. My favourite embroidery style is where people do tiny individual stitches of loads of different colours, and they make almost like a painting or you know, a drawing out of embroidery, rather than, I guess, the more modern style that you see nowadays. I would like to practice more at that, but I'm also quite content just, you know, learning the basics and making simpler designs for the time being. I also get a lot of joy out of creating something which I can then pass on. I think I wouldn't get an awful lot of pleasure out of embroidering something to hone my own skills and then keep, because I wouldn't know what to do with it, but also I'm not going to get better unless I do kind of practice a lot for myself and accept that some things aren't going to be good enough to pass on to anyone. So yeah, that's one thing that I've been thinking about as well. I didn't know if you were filming, and I was like really slowly.